before we get into that, I want to ask this question to kind of get us thinking. Like, I want to give you guys some ideas before we get in. The first is, who am I? Like, who am I? Am I Asian? Am I a goofball? Am I like a young guy, old guy, weird guy? Who am I? And who am I to you? As you think about that, you can also think about who are you? Who are you? Someone identifies as a father or a student? Are you cool? Are you weird or whatever like that? Probably both. Yeah, who are you? What is your identity? What is your identity? And before we really get in, I really want to focus on this idea of identity. You can go to the next slide. I put up like a mosaic of profile pictures from Facebook. You can see, like, yeah, like there's a lot of people that are here with us today. And of course, Michelle's most important to me, so I put her right in the middle. But yeah, like there's a lot of different photos, right? People have not just like different like physical like appearance, right? But people have all these different personalities, the ways that they portray themselves on Facebook to show them what's important, right? Whether it's like friends or family, all that kind of stuff. You guys have an identity that's very beautiful, very unique. Not just about physical appearance, but the ways that you perceive yourself and the ways that others perceive you. Your identity is wonderfully beautiful and complex. Each one of you has a unique identity. And so the idea that I really want to get across right now is that identity is important. You can go to the next slide. And really that identity is important because it moves our actions. Identity is important because it moves our actions. If you think about it, if you identify with a certain job or a certain role, that affects your actions, right? If you're a teacher, you teach, right? If you're a preacher, you preach. If you're a bleacher, you bleach. No, yeah, that really worked out. This might be my lame jokes, one of you. But that makes sense, right? If you identify, if your identity is a teacher, you will teach, right? That's just, your actions will just flow out of your identity. But it doesn't have to be a job role, right? If you see yourself as like the class clown, and you see yourself as comedic and funny, then you'll look up jokes. You'll try to tell jokes, right? Your actions will start to flow out, right? You'll go to watch comedies, all that kind of stuff. It just makes sense if you identify as that way. If you think you're more wise and smart, you go to the library, you want to read, you want to say things that are smart, right? Well, the ways that you identify yourself is important because it actually moves our actions. And so, if we go to the next slide, I think identity is still a little more complex. We're going to unpack that a little bit. Here's a photo of me and my high school friends, and I'm really blessed that some of them are here today just to hear me preach. And so if you look at this, yeah, identity can also be belonging to community. Right? Because identity is not just like, oh, I'm a teacher and that's it, like an isolated. If you're a teacher, you're part of a teacher community, right? And if for me, I was part of my high school friends. This is a community. This is part of my identity. If you guys think like who I am, what's important to me, I would say part of my identity is belonging to my high school friends. And actually, again, like that's how the way I move. If you guys have hung out with me, you might hear things, I might say like, oh my Burma, or like, man, and like all those kind of weird tropes and stuff, right? But that actually comes from this identity. Some of the things that we say have now flowed upon onto me, and I say it now. And some things I contributed to. And so other people in my community here start to say things that I say. And so you see that my identity also belongs to community. That's the second point I really want to make. We can move on. That it's not just, I put this here, identity brings community together. It can definitely bring people together. But I also think that, or something I want to add too, is that identity does belong in community. You never really have an isolated identity. The third thing too, as we continue to unpack identity, is that identity also can be centered on love. Next slide I have is this picture of Toy Story. And I'm sure most of us have seen this iconic Pixar movie that's like critically acclaimed, it's crazy, but if you look at it, it's also pretty crazy. Like you have a dinosaur and then a Mr. Potato Head, and what the heck is going on? But even though they're so like all over the place and complex and different, their identity is found in love, because they all love Andy. Andy is the young boy who owns all these toys, and all they want to do is make Andy happy. And they're all loved by Andy. Right? See, in this community, in this movie, this identity is found in love. They love Andy, and they're loved by Andy. And that's the third point I really want us to think about, that identity can also be centered on love. And then the fourth point, really before we go on, is that identity can also hurt us. It can be used for violence and for evil. Go to the next slide. There's two pictures of riots that happened this year. On the top right is the Ferguson riots. And we see how people, because of racial identities, people because of their pride and their ethnic barriers and all this kind of stuff, identity can separate us. Separates so much that people will actually act violently. The fact that we have riots and people are hurting each other violently, physically. You can even see there's a divide right there. As the police stand in that line, there is a separation. On the lower left is also another riot that happened in Hong Kong. Because of different political ideologies and the ways that people think, they're separated. Identities have separated people so much that they were willing to fight each other and to hurt each other. So unfortunately, identity can also be used to separate people and to hurt people. And so, why am I talking about this? I thought we were talking about the Bible and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I'm not here just to talk about some like psychological or sociology study. I really do want us to really gain insight from what God has to say for us. And really, what does God have to say about our identity? What does God have to say about your identity and our identity as a church too? So, before we go on, the passage that we have is 1 Peter 2, 9, 10. And I want to give some background story, because, man, what the heck is 1 Peter 2, 9, 10? Like, what is this? What's going on? I want to give some backstory about what is happening so you guys understand what's going on. So, Peter is the author of this letter. This letter was written around 2,000 years ago. If you guys don't know, Peter is one of Jesus' like best buds. Like, they were like peas in the pod, close, like, they were like great. And so when Peter was hanging out with Jesus, they spent a lot of time together. And after Jesus had died, rose, and left, Peter had this ultimate task of continuing the legacy of Jesus, primarily through starting churches. So Christianity back then, 2,000 years ago, was very new, right? It's not like today. And so it's a very new identity. And as Peter is starting churches and stuff like that, they're actually facing persecution too. There's actually a lot of violence. A lot of persecution from whether it's political or physical or cultural. There's persecution against the Christian identity. And so, okay. And so with this persecution, Peter wants to encourage the churches. Peter wants to help them and really talk to them in this state of persecution. So he writes this letter specifically to the churches of the Asia Minor, which is like near the Middle East. He's writing this letter to encourage them to speak truth into their lives. And that's what we're going to read today. Peter's writing this encouragement to them. And so let's keep going. Before we go on, I had this funny little picture. It's not that funny. I thought it was funny, but clearly no one's laughing. So, but I think the point is that you can see like the little comma on the second one makes a big difference, right? And I think we don't want to really get too quick. We don't want to just blow through the text and like whatever, right? We want to take it as it is, what it says, right? We want to examine it very closely. Actually, as of my time here at Mosaic, I've learned very much that as I'm preaching and stuff like that, I must take the text as it is, and I can't throw like my own interpretation and try to rip it up and stuff like that. So we're going to take the text very closely and see what it has to say. What does God have to say to us today? So why don't we dive straight into it? We're going to look at the first verse today, verse 9. Oh, not today, right now. We're going to look at verse 10, of course. Verse 9, let's read it together. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. So again, Peter is writing these words to the persecuted Christians. He says to them, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. All right, let's get into it. Let's get to the next slide. Let's look at the first half. What is Peter trying to say? You are a chosen people. So these people are chosen. They're pursued after. They're specifically chosen. I choose you, these specific people. It's a chosen people, right? It's not a chosen individual or this or that. It's a group, it's a community. You are a chosen people that's here today. And not only that, let's build upon that. It's not just a random people or anything like that, but it's also a royal priesthood. These people have been chosen and been elevated to a state of kingliness, of queenliness. They are royal. And not only that, they're also a priesthood. You know, back then, and even now, like not anyone can be a priest, never can be a pastor. Like as I pursue my pastoral role right now, I have to go through 3 years of schooling, right? It requires like rigor and education. But Peter's saying, hey, you guys are a chosen people. You're a royal priesthood. You guys are a holy nation. Again, you guys are set apart. You guys are elevated because of your identity. And finally, you're God's special possession. To me, that sounds very loving. That's like wonderful. I'd love to have that identity. I think that's what Peter is saying to these Christians right now. That, hey, you guys are serious, like facing intense persecution. They're being thrown in jail, they're being physically hurt, they're feeling discouraged, they're being doubtful, right? Things are not going well. But Peter wants to remind them that, hey, remember your identity. Remember your identity, that you are loved. You are a chosen people. You are God's special possession. I have a special possession. Woo, Jigglypuff. I got this little Jigglypuff plush when I was 6 years old. My mom got it for me. And it was my most favorite toy. And I love this one so much that I would carry it wherever I went. Whenever I went to school, there'd be a table right at my front door. And so as I left, I would put Jigglypuff right there. And so that when I came back from school, I could just pick her up right away and bring her wherever I went. Like, she was my special possession. And I loved her just as much as a man can love a toy. So I'll move on from the toys. Don't worry, it's good. But yeah, this Jigglypuff doll is special to me. And what Peter's trying to say is that, hey, churches, Christians, you guys are special to God. You guys are special, and you guys are beloved. I said before, identity leads to action, right? I think we can agree that based on your identity, it'll affect the ways that you move. So I think we should think about that as we go on to the next part. So the full verse 9, right, says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. So the grammar, right? You guys are an identity. You guys are this specific people, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. You see, what Peter's trying to get to right now, right, is that he wants to encourage these people. He wants to remind them of their primary identity. They're loved by God. And not only that, because of this identity, that we move out and we declare the praises of Him. That's what Peter is trying to remind us, and that actually, because we are so beloved, we are so loved, we want to respond by declaring the praises of Him. That should be the natural response. In the same way that a teacher naturally teaches or a preacher naturally preaches, those that we are loved, we actually respond lovingly. And if we know anything about the Christian God, He has constantly always been loving us and been on mission to reach out to us. God's always been trying to reach out and to include people. He's never been trying to, okay, I took a few people and that's it. But He's been trying to bring in more and more people to bring in a loving relationship between Him and also the church. So you see, Mosaic, this is our identity. Our identity is to be a family on mission. Not to be an isolated, not to be a chosen individual, but to be a chosen people, to be a family, to be God's special possession. But not just to hang out there and that's it, but actually to go out there on mission to declare praises of Him, right? To be able to talk about Him to other people. To actually include people. We don't want to shut the doors, we want to include people into this church, into our family. And so we've been talking about Rethink Church, and so I know not all of us have been here for the entire sermon series, but really, the sermon series has been really thinking about rethinking church, right? We've been taking the core elements of the church and trying to rethink it in a relevant and biblical manner. But I think that it's great that, I'm so privileged to talk about the last part of the sermon series, but I think it's also very poignant that this is the last one, right? This is our identity. God's family on mission, that's our identity. One of the first week he said, we talked about church membership. But we joined a church because we're a chosen people, right? Because of our identity, we join a church. We spur and encourage each other on, right? That was one of our other sermons, that we take care of each other, right? We do that because we're a royal priesthood. We're in here together. We use our gifts together. We are also wonderfully complex and different. We use our gifts to build the church together up because we're a holy nation. That's our identity. And we have a transformed love because we know that we are loved. We are God's special possession. What if, we actually took this identity? I really do think we do. I've been so privileged to be part of this church and to be part of a multi-ethnic church, to be able to experience church in ways that I'm just like, wow, this is loving, this is great. And I think we can continue to be this church and step even more out, right? What if we were able to go out there and speak to the abused and the homeless and the orphan, right? What if we were able to be on the front lines of the Ferguson talks and all this kind of stuff, and actually bring people in here just saying, hey, look, this is a place where whatever your ethnicity is, we love you, and it's okay. We can break boundaries that way because we love you, and we know that we are loved by God, right? What if this is our primary identity, and we're really responding to it with love and loving people, right? I think that's what Peter is trying to say. Not just to the church 2,000 years ago, but to the church today, to us. So you see, mission is actually very vital to our identity. We are loved so that we may love others too. So we go on, I want to kind of expound upon one of my analogies. It's Toy Story. It's like pretty easy, right? It's like, but I think it's very relatable, and I know this, maybe not all of us have seen it, but there's been 3 movies out. They've all been like, you know, like really good, like 99% Rotten Tomatoes, all that kind of stuff. It's really good. But if you notice, all 3 movies, they've done 3 movies, but there's one common thing about them is that they're all rescue missions, right? Every single one of them. There's a toy that's lost, whether it's Woody or Buzz or whatever like that. Someone is lost. Someone has left their home and has been captured or something like that. And what do the toys respond? They leave. They actually leave the home and try to rescue their toy and bring them back home. They love these people that are outside that have left, and they're trying to bring them back. And so next picture, here's Mr. Potato Head going in. He's trying to rescue Woody in Toy Story 2. But there's something a little wrong about this picture, is that it's not the bad resolution and stuff like that. We go to the next one. It's that it was just Mr. Potato Head. We're a family on mission, right? I want to really expound this a little more, that what's wonderful about Toy Story is not just Buzz Lightyear going out alone or Mr. Potato Head going out alone. It's a family that goes out together, right? It's a family that went out together and used all their little quirks, little differences to work together to get the lost toy back. And why? It's because they love each other. And also, not just because they love each other, they love Andy, right? Go to the next slide. It's the same picture I used before. They're loved by Andy, and they want to love Andy too. And they know that, yeah, if there's a lost toy, it would break Andy's heart. Yeah, we are a family on mission. So we're not done yet. That was just the first verse, right? We have verse 10 still. So let's continue. I think, well, we've learned a lot about identity and our identity as a church. I still think we should expound a little more and also go beyond just the church too, right? So verse 10, Peter continues, right? Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Again, we see this separation. We talked about this before, that identity, sometimes we are separated because of our identities. We weren't a people of God before, but now we have received mercy. I think this verse is pretty critical and can add on to what we just talked about for identity. Why don't we go to the next slide? I like visual diagrams.